So yeah, Brian and I are here to talk about telling emotionally connective stories and effectively about doing content differently. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk about storytelling or our approach to it. And we hope to leave you a little bit inspired, I hope, to tell some great stories of yourself and also have a couple of basic tenets for doing so along the way. So we'll run through a few examples of work that sort of demonstrate this, including some stuff for the federal police, which we think is a good example of emotionally connective storytelling. And obviously it goes without saying, along the way, if there's any questions from anyone, please feel free to chuck that in the chat. I'll keep glancing back at it as we go, but otherwise we'll just keep rolling on and try and give you a nice high energy, short and sharp session. So we are Common Ventures, and without going into this too much, basically we're a creative agency. That's as much as I'll say about that. I am James and this is Brian, two of the people that work here.
We're both founders of Common Ventures. I'm originally from New Zealand. Started in design about like 20 years ago, so quite old now, I would say. And I started in digital, in an era before internet, when CD-ROM design was still around. So I've kind of seen it all.
I'm less old than Brian, but yes, from country Victoria, and Brian started in design, I started in writing. And yeah, effectively I'm just a story-obsessed person and direct stuff myself as well. But really, in effect, we're just storytellers who happen to know all the channels and all the marketing acronyms and all the stuff that you guys are probably quite familiar with. But at the crux of it, we like telling stories. So we're here to tell you about how to tell better ones, or hopefully how to do so. But it's important to set the scene a little bit first. And as will be no news to everyone, it's been a big year. But even, before March, you could have said that everything is always changing. And that's obviously not changing either. And what really, I guess in our view of this, is what this has really done is just added, 2020 has just added to our sense of skepticism and, impending doom. So a nice optimistic quote there. But I mean, the fact is that we are living in very uncertain economic, environmental times, in uncertain times in general, really. And if you're on the sort of younger end of the spectrum, it's pretty much all you've known, this sort of feeling of uncertainty. And you could say it's sort of as close as you can get to our grandparents sort of, growing up in the shadow of World War II, in that, that context that they had is all they know. So what does that mean? Why am I even saying that? Basically there's just a lot going on in our heads, big stuff, big questions. But on top of that, there's also life. It's easy to forget this, but, it's not just the pandemic, the economy or the environment. It's, why aren't my parents in love anymore?
Is the S or C silent and sent?
How much data is left on my plan?
Why did that girl I thought I was friends with just block me?
Oh, there was that time I was rude to my mate's mum by accident, but I never explained it. And I wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning thinking about it, probably weekly.
I'm hungry.
I should get back into exercise.
Should I become a parent?
Why did I become a parent?
Is AI going to take my job? So while all this is going on, in the middle of all these thoughts, concerns, first world problems and life-changing decisions, you're trying to get your message across, while every other organization is trying to do the same. And the way that we're kind of communicating is getting more and more complex. So basically you're competing with everyone, and social is making that even more complex. So, with so many social channels that change their rules when they want to, everyone is harder to target. It really feels like when we get used to the way that Facebook or Google's algorithm works, then they go and change it on us. But it's also not just that. It's also that social drives people to connect more frequently. So 40% of us don't mind being interrupted for a notification. It influences every aspect of a behavior. So it makes us more likely to purchase, which is very much proven, how likely we're to go out on a date, and actually, how we comment on political or even current events. So basically, people are acting upon social influences quicker than ever before. And so if you really want to instigate behavioral change, you have a far smaller window of opportunity, and you need a better way of telling your stories. Because, be it encouraging diversity, a PSA, or getting people to engage meaningfully with your specific program, whatever the behavioral change you're trying to instill, you need a better way of telling that story. And whilst understanding the platform's algorithm is important, the platform itself, or even the algorithm which serves all the content, it's actually the story that will provide you significant cut through.
And it is easy to forget that, there's so many, and the platforms themselves are obviously, want to make you really care about the metrics and how much money you're spending with them. And obviously, that's the way it is, and that's fine, but can't forget the story. It almost seems obvious to say that, but, it is easy to forget. So to tell a compelling story, there in our heads anyway, there are two ways that you can do that well. And it's pretty simple. It's make it different and make it human. You're going to hear us say that quite a few times as we go through this. Make it different, make it human. So let's talk about difference first. Make it different. We are hardwired to respond to difference, and plenty of smart people have been saying this, much smarter than I have been saying this for a long time, including John Hegarty and whoever else. But it is true. So for instance, if Brian takes his shirt off right now,
not really,
but not going to do it. But I guarantee that we would be the two speakers you remember tomorrow. Well, probably not for the right reasons, granted, but we will be remembered, right? Why is that? It's because of this guy. So, it's our primitive brain. So if I get home and there's a lion or a shirtless Brian where my cave painting used to be, then my brain is going to divert all of its attention to it. And it's just you're consumed by it. Because the fact is that we're forced to react to things that don't belong. I have some examples now of that. And you just tell me if these are attention grabbing or not. They're starting to feel pretty uncomfortable by now, right? We can't help but look at things that just aren't supposed to be there.
That's so wrong.
Another terrifying one. That's probably the scariest of the lot. But an actual example, which I love to use, is the bread aisle. We've all been there. We've all bought our bread. You walk down the bread aisle and everything, to be honest, it pretty much looks the same, doesn't it? You can imagine the design brief for this. It's make it nice and colourful, chuck the logo on it, make sure you can see the bread in like a window and packaging.
For some reason, because we've forgotten what bread looks like.
Exactly, like you're in the bread aisle, it says bread, but no, must see the bread in the packaging. And then so everything ends up looking the same, right? Until someone does something really great, like this place in one of the retailers in the UK a little while ago, decided to instead show the bread. They put what you could have with the bread on the packaging. And for me personally, I think it looks more enticing and makes me hungrier anyway than just seeing sort of tip top through a plastic window. But if you can think about that in the context of that bread aisle, instantly different, instantly attention grabbing, instantly gonna speak a lot, just speak a lot more effectively to me.
And it worked.
And it works, right? Except maybe the cucumber one. They're weird English people, so cucumber on bread is.
Kiwis have cucumber sandwiches.
Do they?
Yep.
Okay, there you go. I didn't know that. So that's it. Make it different. The next one is make it human. Now, I'm just going to have a quick look at the questions. I'm assuming that we're all good. But with stories, okay, so yes, they were terrifying photos. Thanks, Sandra. So yeah, make it human. So telling human stories is really key. So it doesn't matter how long or short you have someone's attention for, you need to tell, or we think it's important to tell, an emotionally connective story. And it's interesting because there's sort of two ends of the scale when it comes to, airtime with stories. You can have things that are really, really quick, like a static image. And this is often overlooked, but static images, right, they take less than a second to consume, and yet they can define an entire generation. And there's countless examples of this. This is a reasonably well-known one. But quick to consume doesn't necessarily mean they're quick to create, just like a good macaroon. But we've found that has been one of the preconceptions of static imagery, is that, because everyone's got a phone and everyone can do it, can make the photo quickly, means that we can instantly have this, generation-defining imagery like that. But, it takes work and it takes effort. And we've got a few examples, hopefully that you haven't seen, of this. So, amazing landscape photographer back in the 40s who kind of pioneered, took all these amazing shots called Ansel Adams, and no one had seen this sort of work before. And he didn't just, take a phone out of his pocket and happen to get lucky. He sat on the roof of his car for 4 days and waited for the rocks and the shadows and the light and the clouds and everything to be just perfect. But, it stands the test of time.
Anne Geddes is a baby photographer from New Zealand, and this is her kind of expertise. And you can really see the story that is trying to be conveyed here, where the baby, premature baby, being held within the hands of an older person. Now, it took a lot to get this image, but she would spend days and days on just kind of the smallest details to make sure that they were perfect afterwards, like looking at a fingernail and making sure that it was perfect, and spending about kind of 3 days just on that one thing. I had a person who, a friend of mine, worked with her on this image and more, and the sorts of calls that they had to go through in terms of hair and the shadows and fingernails and those sorts of things, just went down to the nth degree.
And then we have some recent work that we can show you.
Yeah, so in terms of work from Common Ventures, Pajama is an Indigenous art festival of light based in the NT, and we were brought on board to reposition the festival to increase awareness and visitation. And as a part of that, there is a stills photography component of that. So this is one of the images. You'd have to agree that it's quite stunning, and it really brings to life that idea of seeing the festival in a new light, where rather than kind of focusing on the artworks itself, we really wanted to feature the Indigenous people behind the artwork and do it in a really unique way.
Yeah.
And lots of time and effort were taken to kind of make this happen, in terms of consulting the elders, government steering committee, and all the various stakeholders, as well as obviously the talent itself.
Yeah. And, if we're talking about doing things differently, light festivals, of which there are obviously several throughout Australia, generally the idea is to focus purely on the artwork itself and not actually who's creating it. So again, just a subtle change and a subtle way of doing something differently can help grab attention.
And another shot that we took where it's really kind of, it brings to life the cheekiness that and the eyes really draw you in, make you wonder kind of what he's really thinking.
So yeah, to grab attention, you need to make every piece of content different, and that includes the statics. And it's just a point that we thought would be useful to leave with you guys, is that don't overlook that.
Yeah, it's not all about this selecting stock imagery.
That's right. So yeah, make it different, make it human, I say again. And video is slightly different again. And look, we know that video can be expensive. It can be expensive to make. It can be expensive to seed and to promote and to pay to get in front of people. But again, back to our earlier point, it is easy to forget about the story and get obsessed with the distribution. But if the story is strong, then you can potentially get away with not doing a huge production, and you can get away with not spending as much into promotion because the story itself is more compelling. And yeah, the same rule applies to all content, video as well. Make it different, make it human. So a human story.
Yeah, so as a part of our work with the Department of Home Affairs here in Australia, we had to demonstrate social cohesion amongst diverse cultures. So working with the Muslim charity Brothers in Arms, we created a series of documentary-style videos just after the fires that affected Australia at the beginning of this year.
Okay, now we're going to try playing this video, and I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat. If people can't hear it, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume everything's fine.
I lost my house. I lost my sheds.
So most locals called it D-Day.
So the first fireball came out of that fire there, and it was thrown 8 kilometres that way. And then another fireball came in, another fireball, and then it turned into like hurricane type wind, and it just whipped up, and all of a sudden we were just engulfed with fire.
My name is Dean Mossad. I'm a co-founder and managing director of Brothers in Need. I lived a pretty sheltered life till probably the age of 16. That kind of paved the way of getting engaged, I guess, with drinking to gambling to drugs. I had a near-death experience. It was an overdose of alcohol and drugs. And that's where kind of those aha moments started formulating in my mind and thinking, is this what I want to do for the next 8 years of my life? Or, is it time for a change?
Charity is a part of what we do, a part of what we believe in. So I've been practicing in Ramadan ever since I was 7 years old. The first couple of years may have been hard, but now it's discipline. During Ramadan, a lot of people are more charitable. It's not always about just donating your money. Donating your time is in most cases a lot more fruitful.
I got a call from Dean himself directly and saying, "Hi Tim, I heard about the fire. What can we do to help?" And to have an organisation of the cultural difference in Sydney reach out like that was quite amazing. And I know it has affected the community a great deal.
The most surprising thing for me is that we hold barbecues all the time. So I didn't really do anything different. I just did it in a different place for different people. And the results are amazing.
It's, I think, as humans, whatever nationality, race, culture, faith you come from, this is all embedded in the work that we do. So this is just something that we do as Muslims, as Australians, as humans.
I think it's wonderful that their community is reaching out to a community that they have virtually nothing to do with in any other way, except that they recognise their need and they're responding to it in a very Australian way.
So yeah, an example of something we've done around human storytelling and not being afraid to really just take the time to tell a human story and try and tell it well. Let's see. Oh, okay, we've got one more example to show you in a minute. But to wrap up, I guess these things that you can hopefully take away is that we all have less time to consume content. There's a lot going on, be it geopolitically, be it environmentally, be it personally, whatever it is, and that's increasing. The way that we can get in touch with people is obviously increasing. Proliferation of content, hate that word, is just going up and up and up and up, and there's so much content and so many ways to get in touch with people. We all know this, but you've got less time, more people vying for the same sort of slice of the pie. So when you do get the opportunity to talk to someone, you need to make sure that it is really embedded in something different and if it's appropriate, in a real human story. And the reason why those two things are so important for what we've seen anyway, is you make it different to grab attention initially. So think back to the bread aisle, and then you tell a human story to keep that attention and actually deliver your message. So this example that I'd love to play to end on here is from some work that we did with the Australian Federal Police, and this is in relation to Missing Persons Week. And what they've done in the past is focus more on the statistical side of what happens, with missing person cases, and that the hardship that the people experience and families experience with that. However, you don't really understand or feel the stats if you've never been through that experience yourself. So what we tried to do was give people a glimpse into what it's like to actually have a family going through a missing persons case and the effect that has on you personally. So I'm glad to say that this, against car ads and all these big brands, with huge budgets won Umbrella's TV ad of the year, and it was just a really simple story, just told hopefully well. I hope you think it's well. Anyway, I'll hit play.
It could be the battery. It could be the rubber band. What do you reckon, kiddo?
Why does this always happen? We're going to be late again. I hate our car.
I know, it's okay.
But you don't understand. Nobody teases grown-ups. Everyone teases me. I've got the crappiest car in the whole school.
We could get a new car. We could. But what if we went past your sister? What if we drove past Maddie? which she recognises, and which she even notices. That's why we drive this thing. So one day she'll see us. She'll recognise this car and she'll know it's us. Maybe you'll come home because of this car.
I know, Dad. I hope so too.
So yeah, that's it as far as our session. It sounds like we're just on time anyway. But yeah, I'll just have a look over here. So, someone just asked, but with stories that are different, wouldn't the issue be that the design overpowers the product? I'm assuming that was back in relation to the bread. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume it is. Well, if you think about the product in that instance, I would argue that everyone knows what the product is, right? So if you have an overly complicated product that requires explanation, then there might be a role for that. I guess where storytelling becomes really useful is when you're trying to move someone to think differently about something, not necessarily get the, deep down information on a technical product. There's obviously a different role of communications for that. If you're trying to change how someone thinks about something, then that's what that's for. Something like bread, obviously, unless you've come up with an amazing bread innovation, people are going to know what it is. So, the role there of the comms is to grab attention and do something different. Because, especially when you're in a supermarket and you've got a captive audience. So hopefully that answers your question. But if there are no other questions, obviously feel free to email us anytime if anyone comes up with something. But yeah, all I can say is make it different. And if you've got the opportunity to tell a human story, really don't be afraid to do that. And I know it's easy to get caught up in the metrics of 6-second ads and all this other communications expertise, which is incredibly important, but do not forget about the story.
And it doesn't have to like I'm going to talk about, it doesn't have to make people cry. You can make people laugh. You can make people feel pride. Like it's all about that kind of human connection, though, that really drives behavioural change.
Yeah.